You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button.
The one thing, having experience with all four of these guys that I'm about to mention, I can say from the bottom of my heart, I do believe we have the best defensive staff in the country. Yeah. And that's not only just from an X's and O's standpoint, but the way they're able to build relationships with the players, the way they're able to get the most out of their players is second to none.
Blake Baker was a guest on Off the Bench with Hester and T-Bob. I don't know that I would say that LSU has the best defensive staff in the country. I wouldn't say they don't. I only say that I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to tell you that I know the qualifications and quality of every assistant from every Division I program in the entire country. What I do know, unequivocally, be it objective or subjective, LSU's defensive staff has dramatically improved. And you don't have to take my word for it. Every Tuesday on Chuck Oliver's show, he visits with CFB Matrix. And Dave Bartu is his name. And a couple of weeks ago, Dave talked about the most improved defensive staff. Listen to what he said.
I think we said this on this show last year, going into the season, worst defensive staff in the SEC, LSU. Now, did they have the worst defense? No, but that shouldn't even be in the conversation when you're a top 5 recruiter. I think you and I would agree on that. So LSU cleaned house on the defensive side. They had a 24.9% increase in defensive coaching grade.
Which he said, by the way, I think that went on, and he said, which was the biggest jump in the SEC, and they went from literally the worst defensive staff grade in the league to one of the best, the biggest jump in the country year to year. So be it objective, subjective, it's very clear that LSU has improved its defensive staff. That alone, because this is the question I think everybody has asked and will continue to ask until they kick off on September the 1st against USC in Vegas. How much better can they be? And I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how much better LSU can be with this staff, given the talent and in spots lack of talent they have. But what I do know and believe is that with better coaching, you can be better than the worst defense in school history. Y'all, LSU last year was 108th in the country in total defense. That is inexcusable, even with the talent they had a year ago. They were 78th in scoring defense at 28 points a game. And I know you're going to look at 28 points a game and go, oh, it felt much worse than that. Well, yeah. When you shut out Army, it's going to skew the stats a little bit. But in their 3 losses, LSU allowed 48 points per game on average in those 3 losses. Yes, they were atrocious. I'm going to say it again. I don't need you to be top 10, top 20, top 30. I just need you to not be the worst defense in the history of the program. Can you find your way in the top half of the country? Can you be top 60? If you're that and the offense does what I think they're going to do, you'll have a chance to win literally every game you play this year. So how do you get there? We know Blake Baker, the core of what he does is coach linebackers. He is the linebackers coach. And a lot of people have drawn the comparison to Damone Clark, a guy that, in my opinion, should have been a first-team All-American his final year at LSU. He was incredible. He just played on a bad defense in that team that laid down in the final year under Ed Ogeron. But Blake Baker was the guy that was the position coach that helped develop Damone Clark, if you remember. And he talked about how they did it.
And I heard all that before I even met Damone Clark. Everybody from the head coach to the janitor, in that building told me Damone Clark cannot play inside linebacker. And I really try to block out that. I want every kid to have a fresh slate, if you will. But it starts with what they're looking at from a key standpoint. and then what that key is telling them. You know, a lot of the guys, especially at a place like LSU, they're built athletically. You don't miss many times on athletic ability. It's usually how can you simplify the game. And the second thing I try to do is say the same thing multiple ways. You know, some kids, they just hear things differently. Once they understand that, that's where their confidence comes from. And that's, to me, what happened with Damone. And I could see it through Perk throughout the spring, like that confidence building. Okay, I know what to do. I know what to look at. Now my athletic ability kind of takes over.
Now the real question is if he could do the same thing with Harold Perkins. Look, Damone Clark is a big old monster. He's a starting middle linebacker in the NFL. Harold Perkins is a very different skill set. But is his skill set enough to make him become a competent and capable SEC inside linebacker? We'll find out. What's interesting, though, the guys did ask him about the inside linebacker room. And we talk about Harold Perkins, and we talk about Greg Penn, and we talk about Whit Weeks. But listen to the name unsolicited that Blake Baker brought up.
You know, I feel extremely confident in our inside linebacker room. The one guy, to me, that I think you're hearing it first on July 8th, but I think he's really been slept on is West Weeks. I think he had an outstanding spring. But when you talk about those four guys, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think all four of them have different skill sets. All four of them are really, really good college football players. So that's one of the challenges for me, honestly, going into, fall camp is you want to get guys really good at a position. And then once they do that, now it's okay, how can we move these pieces of the puzzle around? How can we get them on the field more often together? And that's something that we're definitely toying with throughout the month of July and going into fall camp, because I think those are four of our best players on defense.
I'd expect the linebackers coach to say that the linebackers are four of the best players on defense. Those are his guys. But anytime a coach, and I'll just share, this is just for me, in sitting in press conferences and doing interviews for what feels like a bajillion years now. If a coach ever brings up a player unsolicited, I'm paying attention to that player. Sometimes why open-ended questions are good, because you don't try to paint the interviewee into a box and asking a leading question. You ask an open-ended question to let them go wherever their mind takes them. And if Blake Baker is saying that we're all sleeping on West Weeks, okay, I'm paying attention. Now, I still think it's going to be very hard to get reps if you're committed to making Harold Perkins an off-ball linebacker, Greg Penn with all of his experience as well. And let's just be very honest, Whit Weeks has the higher ceiling. That's not even debatable. Where does the fourth best linebacker in that room get reps? I don't know. But you're always a turned ankle away from being part of a rotation. And one more from Baker. And again, this was Blake Baker on Off the Bench on Monday with Hester and T-Bob. You can go listen to that full interview if you want on demand. Defensive tackle has just been a gigantic talking point because of the need, how hard LSU went in the portal after defensive tackles, and coming up empty. So here was Blake Baker about how they plan to address that position.
At the defensive tackle position, I'd say we're going to be, by committee. I think there's a bunch of different body types. There's a bunch of different skill sets. Again, it's going to be a little more difficult on me knowing I got to figure out who's in the game, when they're in the game, and then try to call the game according to those skill sets and matchups. But I look at what we did at Missouri the last 2 years, and we really rotated 4 inside guys. 3 of them were seniors. None of them got drafted. All good college football players, but not the elite of the elite. And we're going to be creative with them, using their skill sets, moving them around, pre-snap and post-snap, being able to stun them and use some of their quickness, maybe where they lack size, or a guy like Tank who has great size and strength. Again, not moving him as much. So it'll be a little bit more onus on me as the play caller.
Tank, of course, being Jacoby Guillory. I think you can always spin something to the positive in July, and most everybody from every program does. But if you are looking for that positive spin, it's that just on talent alone, what Blake Baker had at Missouri is kind of reminiscent of what exists right now at LSU. Now, last year, there were more talented guys in Missouri. I mean, you had guys like Chris Abrams-Drain. I mean, you had NFL players on that Missouri defense a year ago. You did not have many NFL players on the LSU defense a year ago. But on the interior of the defensive line, there is some validity there to how they made that work without like NFL draftable talent. but you had a lot of veteran guys that are 22, 23 years old, 5th and 6th year players, which is what this team has. Can you cobble it together? It's going to be a fascinating test case to see how much. They're not going to be great. They don't have the talent to be great. But can they be good enough, I think, is really the question. And it'll be a fascinating test case to see as it plays out. Get a good idea of it going up against that Lincoln Riley offense in week 1 out in Las Vegas. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.